In this video, I'll show you how to make a cheeky conceptual portrait like this. We'll combine images of the toy blocks and the baby for a playful composite, using Photoshop to bring everything together. And while it might look a little complicated, with a few simple shooting skills and editing tricks, it's actually surprisingly easy. First, we'll look at the shoot, then later on in the video, we'll delve into the Photoshop technique. I began here by setting up a white board to use as a backdrop, upon which I placed a few toy blocks. I set up a tripod directly above, with my camera angled downwards on the blocks. As for lighting, I'm using two studio flashes with softboxes, one placed to the left of camera and angled onto the blocks, the other bounced off the ceiling to give me a gentle fill light across the frame. If you don't have studio lighting, then you could use window light instead. The key is to keep the angle of light consistent throughout. My camera is in manual exposure mode with the shutter speed at 1/200th of a second, aperture at f11 and ISO at 100. I used a 50mm lens. With everything set up, I took several shots of the toy blocks, adjusting the position and piling them up in different ways to give me plenty of options later on. Once done, it was time to capture my young subject. I carefully placed him in the same position as the pile of blocks. Then, making sure the camera settings and lighting stayed consistent, I captured a few frames of the happy chap. The next stage was to piece it all together in Photoshop. So here's my finished image, and if we take a look in Bridge here, these are my images that I'm going to be using to create my block face effect. So I've got my portrait here, and then I've got various images of the blocks in slightly different positions, and I'm going to use pieces of these blocks to build up my effect. So let's get cracking. I'll open up these into Photoshop, and I'll use the portrait here as sort of a base to add all of the other blocks into. So I'm going to go to this image first, and let's zoom in a little bit closer here in Photoshop. And I need to begin just by removing these letters on the blocks here. So I can do this really quickly if I grab the magic wand tool from the toolbar over here, and then I can just click on a letter, then hold shift and continue clicking around the letters here like this to add them in to my selection. And once I've got all the letters selected here, what I can do next is go to the select menu here and choose modify expand, and I'll just expand by 3 pixels, hit OK, and then I'll go to edit fill and set this to contents content aware and hit OK, and that gets rid of those letters for me. I can hit Command or Control and D to deselect. That's Command D on a Mac, Control D on a PC. And next I'm going to remove the color. So I'm going to do this using the black and white adjustment. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Black and White. And I can just drag over the image here to lighten or darken these different color ranges. So I'm just going to drag to the right over these blocks here to lighten them like this, just so that they're fairly bright and they're all fairly uniform like that. Then I'll hit OK to apply that, and now I'm ready to copy in my blocks. So I'm going to do this by selecting them first. So I'm going to go to the toolbar over here, and alongside the magic wand we'll find the quick selection tool. I can grab that, then just paint over the blocks like this to select them. And you'll see how the tool snaps onto the edges of the blocks in this way. Now if it goes over an area that we don't want to include, such as this little area down here, I can hold Alt and paint to subtract that from my initial selection. So I can just tidy up around the edges here, and once I've got a decent selection, I might want to go into the select and mask command up here, which just allows us to improve the selection edge, and I could quickly just increase the radius by a few pixels and set output to selection and hit OK. So now I've got that selection, I can grab the move tool, click and drag the selection up to the tab of my other image and down in, and then release my mouse button to copy that selection over. Now I've got show transform controls checked in the move tool options up here, which gives me the bounding box around my layer. I've also got auto select layer checked up here, and then I can click on that bounding box and drag outwards just to increase the size slightly and position it roughly where I want it over the face here. Then I'm going to go to my layers panel here by going to Window, Layers, and I'm going to change the blend mode here from normal to multiply. And you'll see how that works. And then just tweak the positioning until I'm happy. Now with that done, I can just double click to apply, and then I can add a layer mask to that layer by clicking the Add Layer Mask icon. Then I can grab the brush tool and I'll set my foreground color to black down here. I can use the left and right square bracket keys to resize my brush tip. And I'm just going to paint with black to hide any parts of the blocks that I don't want to include. So I'll hide the blocks around the edges of the face here like this. Now with that done, what I can do next is add in some more blocks. So I've got another of my blocks images already open here, and you can see I've already removed the color and those letters on the blocks. So I can grab the quick selection tool again, and again make a selection of the blocks like this. And as before, I might want to take my selection into the select and mask command. So once I've got a decent selection of the entire area like this, I'll go to select and mask up here, and again just perhaps increase the radius here by a few pixels. Hit OK, and then use the move tool to copy it in to my main image. And again I'll change the blend mode over here to multiply and click on the bounding box to change the sizing and tweak the positioning once more until it fits in with everything else. So I think I'll bring it to around about there. Hit enter to apply, and again I'll use a layer mask, grab the brush tool and paint with black once more to hide the parts that I don't want to include. So I'll just try and get a fairly neat edge along here so that it covers the top part of the head like this. In fact, let's zoom in a little bit closer there on the head, and just quickly paint over these areas to tidy up the edges. Next, I'm going to add some blocks around the neck here. So I'm going to go to another image here that I have again desaturated. I'll use the quick selection tool to select the blocks around here. I'm also going to select a little bit of the surrounding floor here so that I can pick up the shadows on this particular image. And then with that done, I'm going to once more take it into the select and mask command and increase the radius slightly. Hit OK. And use the move tool once more to drag it into my main image. Then I'll position it down here and again change the blend mode to multiply, resize the layer. I'll apply that, and as before, add a layer mask, grab the brush tool and hide the areas that we don't want by painting with black around the image. Now I want to hide the parts of the baby's body here that are outside of the blocks. So to do this, I'm going to highlight the background layer there, make a new layer above it, and I'm just going to paint on this layer. So again, using the brush tool, I can hold Alt and click to sample a color. So I'm just going to sample one of these colors here in the shadows, and I'll just quickly paint over the body like this. And I'm going over the edges here, but I'm not worried about that at the moment. I'm just trying to get a basic starting point here like this. Then I'm going to sample a lighter tone over here, again by Alt clicking and using a really large brush tip. I'm just going to paint like this just to get a nice soft transition around the edges like this. So now with that done, I'm going to grab the quick selection tool again, just paint over the entire subject like this. So we'll go over the head, over the ears here, and include these blocks here as well. Then again, once we've got a decent selection, we could quickly go to the select and mask command here, increase the radius and hit OK. And then with that layer that we just painted on highlighted, I'm going to hold Alt and click the Add Layer Mask icon, and that hides the selected area. So now you can see the area that we painted is only working outside of our selection area. So it kind of gives us this effect. Now we might want to just tidy up a few other little areas around our image here. So I'm just going to highlight the mask thumbnail on that block layer down at the bottom there. And again, just use the brush tool to soften the edges of the shadows around the image like this. And I'll do the same on the other layers as well, just to tidy up. Obviously, I'm doing this very quickly. You can spend a bit more time just perfecting your layer masks. Now, there are a few bits around here that look slightly messy. So what I'm going to do is make a new layer here, just above my background layer here. And I'm going to, again, just using the brush tool, hold Alt and click to sample one of these pink skin tones and then just paint to fill in the rest of these blocks around here like this. Do the same over here. And now I think we could add in a few sort of scattered blocks around the frame. So I'm going to go back into Bridge here and I'll open up this image here. And I'm just going to use the lasso tool in the toolbar over here and just make a very quick selection around an area of the blocks like this. Again, I'll use the move tool to copy that selected area into my main image and I'll position it over here. I'll drag that layer to the very top of the layer stack here. And again, I can just click on the bounding box, change the sizing and the positioning of that layer and just tweak it until it kind of looks in the right sort of place around about there. Hit enter to apply that. And I'm going to change the blend mode here to multiply once more and perhaps just lighten the layer slightly. So I can use Command or Control and M to bring up curves, and I'll just lift that layer a little bit like that by just dragging up on the curve line and making just an adjustment like that. And with that done, I'll hit OK and add a layer mask to that layer, then paint with black to hide the edges like this, just to soften that transition between the layers like this, so it kind of looks a bit more natural. And I think I'll add some other blocks over this side of the frame. So I've got another image here that I'll use for this. And again, I'll use the lasso tool to select these blocks to the left of the frame this time. Again, use the move tool to drag them into my main image, position them over to the side over here. And again, I could change the blend mode to multiply. Just tweak the brightness using curves once more. And as before, use a layer mask to blend the edges and soften the transition like this. So that's looking pretty good. I think I might need to just tidy up a few little messy patches. So to do this, I'm going to make a new layer here at the top of the layer stack. And I'm going to grab the clone tool from the toolbar over here. I'm going to make sure the sample here is set to all layers. And then I can just zoom in and I can tidy up some of these little messy areas around the frame. So there's a little area here. What we could do here, if I hold Alt and click, I can sample some of the white floor there. And then I can just paint to kind of sort of eat away at parts of the edges of the subject, just to give it that impression of these kind of block-like edges around the frame like this. And there's a little bit here that looks a bit messy, so I can just Alt click to sample a clean source nearby and then just paint to tidy up these little messy areas around the frame like this. And if we just quickly whiz around the rest of the image here, I could perhaps do the same with the ear on this side, perhaps just eat away a little bit at it by cloning in a bit of the nearby floor. And I could perhaps just clone to extend this edge along here like this. So it's worth spending some time with the clone tool in this way to just perfect the composite and make sure there are no little messy patches around the image. We might want to round off by adding a tonal effect on top of everything, so we can create a merged copy of all of our layers here. If we just highlight the top layer, then use the keyboard shortcut Command or Control plus Shift Alt and E, and that will merge all of the layers below into a single layer there at the top of the layer stack. Then we can bring this into the Camera Raw filter by going to the filter menu here. And we could choose a profile here just to style up our image. I'm going to go for this modern 4 profile here. We could also perhaps just lift areas using the adjustment brush. So I can just load it with some positive exposure, then just paint around these areas here just to lighten them, just so we get a nice mix here. We could darken areas as well if we like, just by making a new adjustment using that adjustment brush once more, and just tweak things in this way until we get a good mix of tones. Let's perhaps up the contrast and the exposure a touch as well here. Back in the basic menu, perhaps lift the shadows a touch as well, and we could perhaps just increase the vibrance for a really colourful, vibrant result. So there we have it. That's how to piece together an array of photos for a vibrant, playful composite.